Hi there, Miss Rubber here. This module is called Logic and Problem Solving, Thinking Critically. The first lesson is Living in the Media Age. The learning objectives for this lesson are 1. Identify the 10 basic types of fallacies, and 2. Analyze those fallacies. Before we proceed to those fallacies, let's learn some basic definitions. Logic is the study of the methods and principles of reasoning. An argument uses a set of facts or assumptions called premises to support a conclusion. A fallacy is a deceptive argument, an argument in which the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. Let's go ahead and observe that while a fallacy is defined as a deceptive argument, there is no intent assigned to the deception. Fallacy structures. We are now ready to examine our 10 fallacy structures. You will need to know these by heart. Appeal to popularity. Many people believe P is true, therefore P must be true. False cause. A came before B, therefore A caused B. Appeal to ignorance. There is no proof that P is true, therefore P is false. Hasty generalization. A and B are linked one or a few times, therefore A causes B, or vice versa. Limited choice. P is false, therefore only Q can be true. Appeal to emotion. P is associated with a positive emotional response, therefore P is true. Personal attack. I have a problem with the person or group claiming P, therefore P is not true. Circular reasoning. P is true. P is restated in different words. The argument states the conclusion. Diversion or red herring. P is related to Q, and I have an argument concerning Q, therefore P is true. Straw man. I have an argument concerning a distorted version of P, therefore I hope you are fooled into concluding I have an argument concerning the real version of P. Example. Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Ford pickup trucks than any other light truck. Let's first identify the premise. The premise is more people drive Ford pickup trucks than any other light truck. The conclusion based upon that premise is Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. Let's analyze. This argument suffers from the fallacy of appeal to popularity or appeal to majority, in which fact that large numbers of people believe or act some way is used inappropriately as evidence that the belief or action is correct. Example. I placed a quartz crystal on my forehead, and in 5 minutes the headache was gone. The crystal made my headache go away. Let's identify the premise, that is the supposition on which I'm going to draw my conclusion. That supposition is, I placed the quartz crystal on my forehead. And the conclusion that I'm drawing is, 5 minutes later, my headache was gone. Now let's analyze this argument. This argument suffers from the fallacy of false cause, in which the fact that one event came before another is incorrectly taken as evidence that the first event caused the second event. Can you think of any false cause arguments? Example. Scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Therefore, anyone who claims to have seen a UFO must be hallucinating. So let's go to the premise. That is, what are we basing our conclusion on? The premise is there is no proof that aliens have visited Earth. Now, what are we concluding? Well, the conclusion is, therefore, aliens have not visited Earth. Now, let's analyze this argument. A lack of proof of alien visits does not mean that the visits have not occurred. This fallacy is called appeal to ignorance because it uses ignorance, that is, the lack of knowledge about the truth of a proposition, to conclude the opposite. Example: I saw 3 people use food stamps to buy expensive steaks, so abuse of food stamps must be widespread. Let's explore this a minute. The premise of this argument cites 3 cases of apparent abuse. However, 3 cases not sufficient to establish a pattern, and definitely not sufficient to conclude rampant abuse. The analysis here: the fallacy is hasty generalization. A hasty generalization is one in which a conclusion is drawn from an inadequate number of cases or cases that have not been sufficiently analyzed. Example: she refused to testify by invoking her First Amendment rights, so she must be guilty. The premise here is that she refused to testify, and the conclusion drawn from her action to refuse to testify is therefore she must be guilty. Let's analyze this. This fallacy is called limited choice or false dilemma because it artificially precludes choices that ought to also have been considered. Example: in ads for Michelin tires, a picture of baby is shown with the words, "because so much is riding on your tires." The premise here is you love your baby, and the conclusion is if you love your baby, then you should buy Michelin tires. Let's analyze this. The advertisers hope that the love you feel for your baby will make you want to buy their tires. This attempt to evoke an emotional response as a tool of persuasion represents the fallacy of appeal to emotions. Example: Senator Falk's bill on the new vaccinations policy is a sham because he has accepted contributions from pharmaceutical companies that manufacture the vaccines. So let's look at the premise. The premise is Senator Falk has accepted contributions from Big Pharma. From this, a conclusion is drawn that the bill on the new vaccinations policy is a sham. Let's analyze this. A claim about Senator Falk's personal behavior is used to criticize the bill. This is a fallacy called personal attack. Example: I deserve a high grade, so I should be given an A. The premise is I deserve a high grade. The conclusion: I should be given an A. The analysis of this argument: this argument says I deserve a high grade, so I should be given a high grade. The conclusion is a restatement of the premise. Thus, this argument suffers from a fallacy of circular reasoning. Example: we should not continue to fund cloning research because there are so many ethical issues involved. Decisions are based on ethics, and we cannot afford to have too many ethical loose ends. Now let's look at the premise. The premise is we cannot afford to have too many ethical loose ends. Note, the conclusion is stated first. Now the conclusion is we should not continue to fund cloning research. The analysis here: the argument against cloning research is all about ethics and not about cloning research. This argument represents the fallacy of diversion, also often called red herring. Provided for you are 5 steps of evaluating media information. 1. Consider the source. Is the source of the information clear? And does the source have credibility? 2. Check the date. When was the information written? For example, is it still relevant today? 3. Validate the accuracy. Corroboration. Can you validate the information with other independent sources? Does it contain anything that appears suspicious? 4. Watch for hidden agendas. Is the information presented objectively and fairly? And 5. Don't miss the big picture. Example: let's evaluate the Mars in the night sky claim that is in your textbook. On August 27th, Mars will look as large and bright as the full moon. Don't miss it, because no one alive today will ever see this again. Let's analyze this stuff. 1. Consider the source. The original source of the claim is not given. You have no means to determine if the source is authoritative. 2. Check the date. Although the claim sounds specific in citing August 27th for the event, no year is given, so you have no way to know if the claim is intended to apply to this year, every year, or a particular past or future year. 3. Validate accuracy. This claim is easy to look up, and you'll find numerous websites stating that this is untrue. Of course, you must also check the validity of those websites before believing them, but you'll find some reliable sources such as NASA and other well-respected news sites. We therefore conclude that the correct answer to the chapter opening question is D. The claim is false, but let's go ahead and continue with the last 2 steps anyway. 4. Watch for hidden agendas. In this case, there's no obvious hidden agenda. It seems more likely that the claim is just a misstatement of fact. Additional research will show that the claim originally arose in 2003 when, on August 27th, Mars came slightly closer to Earth than it will come again for at least 200 years. However, Mars was still nowhere near as large and bright in our sky as the full moon. 5. Don't miss the big picture. This step asks us to stand back and think about whether the claim makes sense, which you can do by thinking about the hint in the chapter opener. Mars is a planet orbiting the Sun, while the Moon orbits the Earth. This fact means that the Moon is always much closer to us than Mars. In fact, even at its closest, Mars is about 150 times as far from Earth as the Moon. You can then conclude that Mars could never appear as large and bright in our sky as the full moon.